All right, it's been a little bit, and I decided not to record putting the headers in because holy hell was that a job. Turns out these headers have three studs up here. Like there's on the head, there's a place for 3 more studs on the top here, and I had to pull them out of the head itself. And so if you're putting these on and you're wondering why you have 3 extra bolts, that's why, is because there's no divots in the areas where they go, because the stock headers, the stock EFI exhaust manifolds, they have 3 holes on them for 3 bolts that hold just the headers on. They're not flanged like these are for the exhaust header and the intake manifold. Another thing I ended up doing is I ended up making a heat shield for my starter down there. I'm not really sure if you can see that at all, but it's kind of just a quick DIY pop riveted together heat shield. I also got a new starter since my old starter the plunger was sticking and it was staying engaged with my starter gear, with my flywheel. And that's about it. Trying to get these on here is a bit of a pain because you have this bolt right here that holds it on, and then you got to get it lined up on this one back here. There's a bit of a half moon shape for it to go and sit on that stud. So I do think it's better to at least have a stud on that last one right there. Whoops, my step ladder moved. Anyway, I'm going to show you something real quick that I did for my alternator bracket. So when you're putting these headers on, you're going to have a bit of a problem with interference on your alternator or even smog pump bracket. And so you got to get one of these things, or you could just even make a little homemade type of bit out of like a block of styrofoam and a bunch of kebab skewers. And what you're wanting to do is you want to go in to the side like this and find out where this goes. And I ended up lining this, or taking this top bolt out right here and lining it up with that orange bit right there, and found out kind of where I needed to modify this. And this bracket right here for my alternator, so this is what I did right here. This is that top bolt right there, and just kind of line it up like right that, and kind of try to mark that out with the marker and cut it out with a reciprocating saw or a Matavo with a cutoff wheel. And this fits pretty nicely in there now. If I can show you real quick. Just like that. Don't need a spacer or anything. I also ended up cutting off the bottom half of this where the smog pump for the air injection right at the top of the heads here, which this head already has all those holes blocked off with plugs. And down on the exhaust manifold, or the stock exhaust, there's also pipes that run right before the catalytic converter for injecting extra oxygen into the catalytic converter for emission control. Nowadays, vehicles only have a EGR system which pulls up exhaust and runs it through the intake to control your lean condition of producing too many NOx or oxides of nitrogen, which are produced from incomplete combustion at lean conditions, which would be like right when you let off the throttle after hard acceleration. And I'm just going to be, since I don't have a pipe running up to connect my EGR back together, I'm just going to put a gasket on my EGR to stop the flow, stop what would be just a big old vacuum leak. I don't have the stuff to be able to completely remove the EGR system, and I plan on hooking it back up eventually, but currently I'm in an area that doesn't really care about emissions and getting my vehicle tested, so I don't really have to worry about it right now. I'm not in California. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to the time lapse and start putting this all back together. I'm not sure what else I'm forgetting. Oh, if you don't have your headers wrapped like this for heat insulation with your starter bracket, or not starter, your alternator bracket, you're going to want to make a little heat shield for your alternator too around this pipe. But this should be enough for me for heat insulation for my alternator. Also, if you have a bigger alternator, I did check the fitment of my alternator, and my alternator and the bracket will fit over this just fine, and there's about 1 inch of clearance between this pipe and the alternator. And that's about it. I did have an issue with this pipe coming loose too. I ended up having to pull it out and put a bit of flange sealant and try to fix this, how it's swelled there and how it's an interference fit a bit. And it's a bit difficult to do. Anyway, if you do need to pull this pipe out and flare the pipe end a bit to be able to get it to seal, I suggest annealing it first so you don't end up cracking the metal, and that's just by heating it up with a blowtorch up until it's red hot, and then letting it cool naturally, and that anneals it, makes the metal more pliable, and also helps relieve metal fatigue stress. And then you won't have a issue with cracking the metal when you try to flare it back out again. Anyway, last thing is my intake. I had this little ear break off. I ended up having a friend weld it back together for me instead of trying to go find another intake, because trying to go to a junkyard and get an intake off without cracking this last ear over here would be a pain. But I got all my injectors pulled out and sent it over to him to get it welded together, and I'm pretty happy with it. There's enough room for the bolt, but I have a feeling it's going to end up cracking again when I torque it down, because it kind of slopes off this way. It's not perfectly flat, so I needed to put a little bit of a hardtack epoxy type of stuff right here to try to fill that in, and hopefully it won't end up cracking again, but it probably will. So I'll see you at the end of the